Oh, now
Hi.
it's recording.
Yes,
Okay,
we're
perfect.
recording. Look, I think she understands we're not videographers.
Because it's a report.
It, hopefully she understands.
Exactly. All right.
So, who are we speaking with?
We are speaking to me.
And who's me?
My name is Curtis Lipscomb. I'm the executive director of KIC, the Agency for Lesbian, Gay, Bi, and Transgender African Americans.
Okay, and what does that mean?
That means that we are a Michigan nonprofit that's organized around identity. These identities, gay, lesbian, bi, and transgendered, are social identities that people who are attracted to the same gender and have some different types of attractions to different people, um, which are unique and different to the larger population. So, if you are a woman and you love intimately another woman, you could be identified as lesbian. Uh, Identities are vast, they're unique, but the majority of people who love the same gender, we identify ourselves as, or or love two genders, are people who identify as lesbian, gay, bi, and transgender.
Okay, great. So I was wondering because I had this class and they're wondering what is social welfare policy. Well, I have my own definition of social welfare policy, which I showed them earlier. But what is your definition of social welfare policy?
When I think of social welfare policies, I think of two of the most famous presidents of the United States that has impacted the public in the 20th century, right? One is Franklin Roosevelt, who introduced the New Deal,
Mm-hmm.
creating programs for the public good that we use today. You know, unemployment and Social Security are two programs that definitely changed how we operate. Lyndon B. Johnson, the creator of the Great Society, believed that this country couldn't move forward without thinking about race and really being proactive in ending racism. So when I think of welfare,
Social
social
welfare
welfare
policy.
policies, I think of those two leaders
Mm-hmm.
that they had the power to, through the federal government, they had the power to create change and create change immediately, even when sometimes change happens very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think a lot of us don't want the government in our business, but for some, if you're African American, if you are brown skin or black skin, if you are a woman, you need a champion. You need someone to organize around big issues. You know, women not being able to vote at one point, the Voting Rights Act for African Americans, even places where we live. You know, you needed people to advocate on those issues, and those are big issues. Um, and those are issues where there should be a concentration around change. If we are not doing well, there's a potential of harming others, right? And not necessarily intentional. So let's say if I am a young, poor woman who doesn't have much access to institutions and knowledge that places me from poverty to prosperity, then I impact the prosperous person because the prosperous person has to pay for that person's well being.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that there's a space that we all grow together. I think there is responsibility to take care of one another, um, and there's various ways of doing that. I think that when you concentrate on how we all can rise together, we all gain together.
Yes.
I don't benefit if you're in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
There will be harm um, of your impoverished lifestyle because you may think that because I have nothing, then I have nothing of value in life, and so my life is invaluable. So then I could possibly cause harm because I don't care about myself. So I'll hurt you, and who cares? I am therefore disconnected to the greater good.
Gotcha. So I was
I
looking
know I
at this.
rambled. I didn't mean to ramble.
No, you're good, Dad. So I started to think about social policies and how they've affected not just LGBT people, but people. And so I started researching like past policies that were harmful. And what I came across was this type of institutionalized assimilation that was brought upon Native American people when they were sent to these boarding schools and completely assimilated into white culture and taught to be servants and things like that. And I thought about the discrimination
Deshaun, can you go next door and see what Rihanna wants, please?
and I also thought about the ways in which that impacted people's lives. And I started thinking about how that relates to anything in present day. Is there anything that's legal that is still showing aggression, not even just aggression, but oppression towards the people? Like, is there a certain policy that gives certain people this type of what's the word I'm looking, privilege in life and disenfranchises other people? And I started to think about one that affects this organization that David was telling us about earlier.
Hmm.
And I was wondering if you could tell us about the Elliott Larson Act and how it disenfranchises LGBT people.
So the Elliott Larson Act is Michigan's civil rights law that identifies various types of uh, uh, categories or classifications that a person cannot legally discriminate against, or an institution cannot legally discriminate against. And that's a good thing. Any kind of structure that protects people, great. And the Elliott Larson Act, if I recall, protects a number of types of people, whether if you are, you cannot be discriminated against if you're a woman, you can't be discriminated by your race, you can't be discriminated by your creed, nor your religion. You certainly can't even be discriminated against your weight. So if you're an overweight person, you can't be discriminated, which is a good thing. Um, but it does not recognize discrimination by your sexual identity. I touched upon that earlier, or your gender expression, which is different than your sexual identity. Uh, though for a long period of time in Detroit, Michigan, those classifications, sexual identity and uh, gender expression, had been protected since 1972. So if you lived in Detroit, you were fine. You're a gay person looking to be employed by the city. You were safe. And that was hard work of people in the 1960s in the civil rights movement, producing something very fruitful, right? Um, but a lot of us in Detroit, Michigan aren't even aware of that protection. You move on, times change, you go into the 80s, you go into the 90s, and the state did not update their civil rights law to include sexual orientation and gender. Now, through the work of Unity Michigan, which KIC is a coalition member, we've surveyed Michigan residents, and forgive me, I don't have the number in front of me, but we asked Michigan residents, do you know that you could be fired legally in Michigan for being gay or perceived? That's also part of the law. There's this, you can be perceived to be gay and legally be fired. Um, Many people in Michigan didn't know that that law exists. And people also thought that that was wrong. People couldn't understand why would someone be discriminated against because they are lesbian, gay, bi, or trans, or perceived to be. So here you are, you have this great law, the Elliott Larson Act, that protects people, but we believe it needs to be amended, just amended. Unfortunately, um, our leadership right now in Michigan chooses not to amend it. And it doesn't necessarily need a whole lot of work to be amended. Right now, our Attorney General um, has issued a stay for Michigan residents who wants to get married. For a brief period when our judge who was listening for the case of two women wanting to adopt some children and
Hazel
were
Park,
denied.
right?
Hazel
Hazel
Park,
Park.
Michigan. They were denied because we didn't recognize same-sex adoption. Well, when the judge overruled that, you had this immediate connection that you couldn't be discriminated in Michigan because you were gay and lesbian. And so a number of people, fortunate enough to live in Oakland County, got married. 313 people, I believe. The Attorney General stopped that and said, literally, the next day, stopped it and said, we're going to put a stay on this until we, and I don't know the legal jargon offhand, but he wanted to stop any additional marriages that are same gender, same sex marriages. Um, I don't believe that that is a number one issue in Michigan. Um, Persons being able to marry the same gender. And I think that by halting that decision, it definitely negatively impacted the party that he's with, um, and their potential um, future in leadership.
Mm,
I believe.
I hope so.
Well, I wouldn't hope that. I think that, with education, that people understand why this is a good thing. Like I was just telling you, I was reading a report on the good news about same-sex marriage economically, for people who live, where they live. Like the report I was reading that looked at DC's marriage. It looked at the District of Columbia's state of marriage and how it benefited the area financially. And this report suggested what would happen in Michigan if the law was changed and therefore gays were married. Uh, for somebody like me, um, who is a gay man, having the option to marry in my home state is a good thing. If I was married here, I would be less likely to want to move to a place where there's an opportunity that exists. And like many states, we are in competition so that residents could have a wonderful quality of life. Um, some people move to other states for a number of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I would hate that this would be a reason for many people who live here to leave. Um,
So going back to what you said earlier, you don't believe marriage equality is the most important agenda for changing changing the social welfare of people here that are LGBT. What do you believe is the most important thing that needs to be reformed for the protection of LGBT people?
well, you ask, what is important about the LA Larson Act. I say to you that the average Michigan person did not know that there was a law that denied protection if you're lesbian and gay, bi, and trans.
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't know, the assumption was that they were already protected.
Okay.
So you have to educate people about the law and get them thinking about, what does that mean? So if I didn't think that that existed, then it can't be a priority.
Right.
So I think the priority for most people in Michigan is the ability to support their family. I think there's a connection between marriage and economic prosperity. Uh, for the individual want to live freely and want to have an opportunity to earn a decent wage and therefore support themselves or their families. I think that's the number one issue in Michigan, to be able to have access to work, employment, or financial wealth. Marriage is a connection to that. Uh, and so if I'm gay and lesbian, and if I want to be protected, then I want to live in a safe place. And right now, if I'm gay and lesbian, Michigan isn't safe. In Detroit, Michigan, you're safer because for city workers, you're very safe if you're gay and lesbian. Uh, I know that in some municipalities in Michigan, I would say about 33 right now with the work of Unity Michigan, we have changed so that these individual municipalities and towns have said, we will protect our workers. So again, I may be safe in this town, this city, and that's a good thing. So if I worked for the city, I'm good. But again, not the state.
So you're saying is if I am a Detroit police officer
Hmm.
and I get a position with the state troopers, I'm no longer safe.
Because the state of Michigan does not recognize you're not protected because you work for the state,
Okay.
right? And the state does not protect people who are uh, lesbian, perceived to be gay, who are or perceived to be LGBT.
It seems like you have more protection in the military than you do if you had a state job.
You have more protection working for some private industries in Michigan. So the big three protect you. There are businesses in Michigan that protect you. These businesses believe that the law is not right. So what they've done is protected themselves. They believe that this is a good thing. Going back to your question about social welfare policies, they believe that a competitive and healthy workspace is a good thing. So if I am protected, I'm less worried about these other life issues. I can just go to work and produce,
Hmm.
right? So the big three has protections for people like that. They're in Michigan. And that's what others have done in their own policies. People who believe that the law is wrong, they've written in their own employment policies that they're protected.
Okay, thank you. And my last question would be, how will KIT continue to fight for the social reform of the Elliott Larson Act through connection with Equality Michigan?
Well, Equality Michigan and 6 other nonprofits, including KIC, are members of a coalition called Unity Michigan. And we've been charged for the last 3 years to amend the Elliott Larson Act. We believe that that's a high priority, that having people protected in your home state is a good thing. Uh, we would be identified by some people as a people of color organization, specifically an African American organization, that we believe would identify those who are black or brown and be able to engage in this conversation that is safe about this issue. Again, many people in Michigan do not know that this law exists. And so, with Detroit being Michigan's largest city, 82% African American, we believe that we are better equipped than some nonprofits in talking to black and brown people around the issue. Some people believe that lesbian, gay, and bi trans issues are a white issue, that it is predominantly organized by white people. Uh, we know differently, but it's our job to share that there are all types of lesbian, gay, bi, trans people that are affected by this law. And so we believe that's our part in this work.
Well, I thank you very much for having time to interview me. I know you're a very busy guy.
I
I don't know if you
appreciate
see
that.
this full desk and computer.
It's a mess. My desk is a mess. So, hey,
But I
I wish
appreciate
you
you.
luck. Thank you for this opportunity to share. Um, Professor and students, good luck in this work. I applaud you in creating change and just have a great day. It's nice to meet you all.